Denver sports are never boring, and especially the Denver Broncos are never boring. Even when things don't go well, I don't think many people would have considered the Broncos boring last year. Obviously, big changes this year. Nathaniel Hackett fired during the season last year. Sean Payton coming in. We know what Sean Payton is in the NFL, but what has Sean Payton said about Russell Wilson this offseason? Is there some optimism among the fan base that Sean Payton can help Russell Wilson get back on track?
Yeah, Sean Payton throws away on compliments like Monhel covers. So he is not. If Russell Wilson wants a bunch of flowers, he's going to have to listen to Miley Cyrus on loop probably this offseason. That's just not Sean Payton. But he's been complimentary of Russell's work ethic, his attention to detail. He wants to be better, clearly, but they haven't really talked a lot more about it because the offense isn't in. They're not in pads. But listen. What Payton has said about Russell Wilson, though, is when you go to a karaoke bar, you sing the song you know and the song you can sing well. I'm not singing Whitney Houston. I'm singing Violent Femmes, something you can basically talk your way through. And that's his point with Russell Wilson. Get the plays he does well. Let's do those. And Payton has a history of mitigating disaster, keeping players away from stuff they don't do well, which Russell Wilson majored in last year, and doing things they do well. So look for a run-heavy attack. A lot of play action, a lot of boots, some keepers, not a whole lot, but just taking pressure off him with a more physical run-first identity that then opens up the pass game for Russell Wilson. So for me, Joe, I'll be honest, this is a one-year experiment. This all happened with Russell Wilson prior to Sean Payton. If he shows progress and he throws 28 touchdowns with 10 picks, you move forward. If he doesn't and it's ugly, he may not make it through the end of the season, and then they would look to move on after the season. And that would be a paralyzing cap hit of basically $40 million a year over 2 years. But if it looks anything like it did last year, I can't imagine there would be a year 3 for Russell Wilson. But players, teammates, there's optimism that this new coaching staff, grown-ups back in the building, and Sean Payton, with a history of proficient offenses, that Russell Wilson can rebound. Maybe not be the guy we thought he was going to be when he came here, but even if he's a top 15 quarterback, that would give him a chance to reach the playoffs.
So, Troy, you're obviously been around the team a long time, and often we know coaches are scapegoats when things don't go well, but there had to be a point last year when you realized Nathaniel Hackett was out of his element. Do you know when you pinpointed, not just, week 1 happens, but was there a point when you noticed that, man, this guy just does not have it?
Well, week 1 put him on the Bunsen burner with the decision to kick a 64-yard field goal when you had just signed Russell Wilson to a $252 million contract. Right. You're at the 46-yard line. You're in Seattle. If you go for it on 4th and 5 and miss, no one cares. Right. You put the ball in the hands of Russell Wilson. And so that decision set in motion criticism like I've never seen in Broncos country from the media and fans. The next week, they were counting down the play clock against Houston because they could not get in and out of the huddle. That was a red flag, the size of the stadium. That's something you learned 6th, 7th, 8th grade, how to get in and out of the huddle. But it spoke to a bigger issue of, just the lack of continuity, to lack of communication on what they're doing. And more than anything, just a lack of accountability across the board. But where it really showed up, Joe, was that Colts game. They're beating the Colts 9-6, 147 remaining. They're on the 18-yard line. Matt Ryan has retired, hasn't told anyone. Colts offense is terrible. You just kick the field goal there. You go up 12-6. The Colts have no timeouts. It's Thursday night. It's burning our retinas. It's an awful game, but you win it. You need not apologize for a win, especially if you're the Broncos the last 6-7 years. And I'm in the tunnel finishing up my game story, and I can't see the field, and I'm waiting to hear the cheers for the field goal. And then I hear defense, defense. And I turn to the usher, the guard down there, I'm like, what is going on? He's like, oh, Russell threw a pick. I'm like, to who? And he's like, Stephon Gilmore. What? And it was to Tyree Cleveland, who was a practice squad receiver, basically his whole career here. And so that's when I know Russell Wilson in that game was not playing well. It might have been his worst game as a Bronco, which is saying something because there were 3 or 4 great candidates for that. If you're Nathaniel Hackett, and that play comes in, you stop it and say, we're either throwing a square out, the old Wes Welker, Edelman in the dirt where he catches it or no one does, or we're running the football, we're kicking the field goal, and we live to fight another day. And it was just that idea that there's no consequence and accountability. Whatever Russ wanted, he got, and he wasn't the player we thought he was going to be. And Hackett couldn't hold players accountable. And we saw that later with Melvin Gordon fumbling and then not getting benched and then getting his job back, which undermined his credibility in the locker room, meaning Hackett, and then not coaching his coaches. If you want to be everybody's friend and bro hug guy and everyone likes you as a head coach, that's a tough way to go. But then you better have some hard asses as your assistant coaches. They had none of it. No accountability, no consequence. And the final thing that got him fired was the fighting on the sidelines, where you had fighting with Mike Purcell and Russell Wilson at Carolina. Then against the Rams on Christmas, just an absolute crap fest of a game. You have Dalton Reisner pushing Brett Rippon on the sideline and Randy Gregory throwing a punch after the game. That was the final straw in what was a cascade of failures that the owner, Greg Penner, the CEO, is like, it's one thing to get our butt kicked. It's another thing to be so embarrassing that we're fighting each other. So there were multiple moments, but the Colts game was when the season for me was over. That was when they're not going to recover from that loss, and they didn't.
So, Troy, based on what very little we have seen thus far, I'm going to ask you to make a tough prediction. Sean Payton coming in here and being the ass kicker that you're essentially alluding to, do you think it's more likely than not that Russell Wilson has enough of a bounce back that he's the Broncos quarterback in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting an over-under, I would say it's probably 60% chance he's back next year. It's not by much, but Payton, know this, Russell Wilson wanted Sean Payton as his coach. When he looked to get out of Seattle the first time, he was angling to get to New Orleans to be with Sean Payton. He's been humbled. He's lost 10 to 15 pounds. He wants this to work, meaning Russell Wilson. The problem is he's 34, turning 35. So some of it, I don't know, can he get it all back because there's an age issue now that he's going to be dealing with. But I have a feeling, like if you look back at Payton's last year in New Orleans, they had, 29 touchdowns, like 13 picks, playing like Simeon and Jameis Winston. I think 3 quarterbacks started. Ian Book might have started a game. I don't know why Wilson can't do that. Can he be 28-10, 29-12? And if he is, I would think he would get another year because Sean Payton wants to win. If he's, 16 touchdowns, 12 picks, and he's benched in game 13, then obviously they're not going forward with that. And that's the thing. They signed Jarrett Stidham. Russell won't be allowed to struggle the way he did last year without the threat of losing his job. I believe he's going to bounce back to some degree. I can't tell you to what degree because Payton has just had an HGTV makeover on this roster. They're going to be better. He doesn't have enough of his own players in here yet, but they won't be 16 points a game. They won't be. They're the worst offense in the league. That will improve. If they run the football, Russ should be fine, which for me is, again, 28 touchdowns, 12 picks, about the 15th best quarterback, and that puts him in position to have a winning record.